And there is evidence that shows that the first 10 years of a project professional's career is the fastest 10 years of salary growth. So as a kind of vehicle, as I say, for social mobility, that's really powerful because it means from any background, you can very quickly be making a sensible amount of money that can make a drastic difference to your lifestyle.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation. And today our guest is Professor Adam Bodison, OBE. How you doing, Adam?
Very well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Good to have you. I'm wondering, Adam, what kind of things do you do for fun?
Oh, well, I try to get some healthy exercise into my life if I can, just because the kind of job that I've got, you spend a lot of time at your desk. And even when you're out and about, you're on trains and so on. So you're sitting down a lot of the time. So I like to play squash where I can, although I don't play it as often as I should do. I like to get down to the gym. I like to do hill walking and so on. So they tend to be kind of quite physically demanding things to have fun. And I also play the piano.
Mm, excellent. That's quite different, isn't it? One really kind of using your body for energizing and all that kind of hard work, athlete type things. And then you're sitting down there and being serene. Or are you actually more kind of less classical piano playing?
Well, I don't know if I'd describe it as serene. I like to think it's quite nice, but the other people living in my house may have a different opinion on that.
All right, Adam. So tell us a bit about what you do then.
Yeah, so I'm chief executive of the Association for Project Management. So people might not know what that is. So that is a chartered association for the project profession. So essentially, we provide the set the standards and provide the qualifications for people who are either project managers or in other project professional roles. And we provide resources and training, development, run events, and so on. And obviously, we provide the mechanism for people to become a chartered project professional. So that's the organisation I run.
All right, okay. So thank you for that. And now I understand that you know how to scale a membership-based organisation. Is that because what you're doing is a membership-based organisation?
That's right. Yeah. So it is a membership. It's always interesting. So the Association for Project Management, I call it APM for short. Otherwise, you'll get fed up of me saying that all the time. So APM, it kind of has these multiple identities. So on the one hand, it's a membership association. So we've got more than 45,000 members. You could say it's a trade association because we have 500 corporate partners. It's also a registered charity. It's a professional body. So it has all of these different identities, which is one of the things that is really brilliant about it because it has this kind of richness to it. But it's also one of the things that makes it really challenging to, as you say, scale in terms of growing the impact and the number of members that they have.
And how many staff do you have then?
So it's currently about 160 staff, or just underneath 160 staff. But to put that in context, when I joined the organisation just over 3 years ago, they had around 115 staff. So there's quite a significant growth there. So it's getting on for 40% growth in 3 years of staff, and I think that is representative of the growth that we've had in the organisation more broadly. So we went from, in the same period, at kind of £10 million turnover. In the last financial year, we hit 16 million, and we'll hit 18 million in the current financial year when that finishes. So that gives you an indication of the kind of pace of growth that we're achieving.
And how does that growth come about?
Always interesting, isn't it? So I was brought in on a kind of ticket of growth, if you like, and that's because I did something similar in my previous organisation, and maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. But there's not one formula that works for every organisation, but there are some kind of, if you like, similar things, similar kind of principles that you can base that growth on, and one of those is around keeping things simple. Sometimes, especially when you've got a complex organisation like APM, there are many, many different expectations on you as an organization. And it's quite easy, I think, to fall into the trap of trying to keep everybody happy all of the time, doing lots of things, but then you never really move the organization on. It kind of just every year, it just does the same thing again. So you get into this kind of vicious cycle, if you like. And it's how do you change that vicious cycle into a virtuous circle? And the way to do it is to identify the things that are complex in the organization, as I was saying before, and just make them much simpler so that people understand what you're about and therefore can get more value out of it. But also then it means you can engage people that otherwise might not have thought that your offer was relevant to them. The other thing I try and do is identify pain points in the organization. It might sound slightly counterintuitive because most people might think, oh, you look for the things that are really good and scale them. But actually, I find it's removing the barriers to growth that's actually more of a catalyst than actually sometimes amplifying the things that are already working. Because often in every organization, there are things. So in APM, for example, one of our issues was around technical debt. We had a CRM which was functionally problematic and wasn't allowing us to actually do the things that we needed to do. So there were all these workarounds in place. And that was taking up a huge amount of staff time. And actually the outcome was far from optimal. So it's focusing on identifying those pain points and removing them. And then the staff can actually scale in the way that they already know how to do. Often they know what needs to be done. There are just barriers in the way.
I love the fact that you said that, Adam. I do a lot of culture change and change work, and that's something that I'm always advocating. And you're right, a lot of exec teams would prefer just to keep amplifying what's right, but not realizing that the things that aren't right are actually huge breaks. It's almost like trying to run up the escalator when it's on down. You're running up the wrong way and then wondering why you keep returning to the same place.
I really like that. I've got this vision in my mind of that now. And to extend that further, every time you remove one of those pain points, it kind of slows that escalator down a bit, doesn't it? To the point where eventually it stops and you can start turning it the other way. And that really, what a great visual. Really like that.
And just at risk of overstretching the visual, if you're running to up when it's going down, you're going to fall and bang your head on it on the way down.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's true. The other thing I sometimes try and do as well is when we introduce something new to the organisation, which, let's face it, every chief exec always comes in with ideas, right? And I'm no exception to that. I have a kind of rule about any new things that we do, and that is that they must be replicable, scalable, and sustainable. And if it doesn't pass those three tests, whether it be my idea or anybody else's, then we don't do it. And that's a really healthy mindset to get into, because what we avoid then is the mistake of introducing something that works, and it's a really niche thing, and it works for a few people, but it's never going to be the game changer for the organization. And it gets people into a really sensible mindset where actually before they even bring me the idea, they've already thought about that.
Yeah, I love it. Tell me, what is the 1-10-100 strategy?
Yeah, so the 1-10-100 strategy, it links to this growth idea. So as I mentioned before, we've got corporate partners that we work with, we've got chartered project professionals, and we've got members. So 1-10-100 was me asking the question of the organization, what would it take for APM to become an organization that has 1,000 corporate partners, 10,000 chartered project professionals, and 100,000 paying members? And to give you a sense of what that leap would look like, it's probably an organization that's 4 times the size that we are today. Now, the reason for doing it in that way was it wasn't saying this is the goal, let's do it. It was asking what would it take? And I think that's a really important way to ask the question, because what it does is it doesn't put me in this kind of superhero box of I know all the answers and nobody else does. In fact, it makes it a shared problem. As I was saying before, the solutions often exist within the organization, the staff, the volunteer community, and so on. They know what the things are that would give us the growth that we need. And so it kind of puts the onus on them and shares this problem. So actually, these are some of the solutions that we need. And then it becomes a case of how do we prioritize the possible solutions rather than, somebody dictating this is what I think the solution is and it may or may not work. We've actually extended 110-100 now as well to 110-100 squared, because one of the things we realized is that we, in articulating that question, I forgot or had an oversight on the qualifications aspect, because qualifications is one of the main sources of revenue for the organization and one of the main sources of reach for the organization. So that extra 100, if you like, at the end is about getting us to the point where we have more than 100,000 people a year taking our qualifications. And at the moment, it's about just over 25,000. I suppose one final point I'd just say is that some people say to me, Adam, why are you always obsessed with growth? Is it just kind of growth for growth's sake? Why growth? And for me, it comes right back to our core vision as an organization. We want to have a world in which all projects succeed, because when projects succeed, society benefits. And the truth is that APM is known for quality, but it's not known widely enough. So this growth point is about making sure that we can amplify our impact and extend our impact by getting greater involvement from a greater number of people to be engaged with what we're doing at APM.
I love that. And not just because that's what I do, help people amplify their influence and impact. And I think sometimes people feel like it's just going to happen without actually working out what needs to happen in that particular space. So I love the fact that you've got that question, what needs to happen for us to get to this point. It shows foresight.
Well, it's interesting because there were some people I thought, hang on a minute, why is Adam coming in as the leader here and asking us what the answer is? Is that right? But again, I think that's a cultural and mindset thing, and we get past that pretty quickly. One of the interesting things that happens when you say, well, what would it take, is that people stop saying, oh no, that's never going to happen anytime soon. People start saying, well, if you really want to get to 100,000 members, Adam, you're going to have to really have a much more of a scalable digital offer for members that maybe we didn't have before, or we're going to have to double the workforce, or it doesn't really matter what it is, but people start saying, well, this is what it would take. And so then we start saying, okay, so if we wanted to double the workforce, how much would that cost us? Could we do that? Well, we couldn't do that. Well, we could increase it by a third. Okay, so if we can increase it by a third, where would that get us to? So then you're in a conversation about how you do it, and it's a very solution-focused conversation. It's not a kind of binary conversation of it will or won't work. So I think that's quite powerful.
No, well, I love that, because too often project managers within organizations aren't seen as solution focused, and they're not acting as if they're solution focused advisors. More, here are the rules we've made up without consultation with the people actually doing the work, and this is what you're going to do. Or worse, that they've agreed, I don't know, someone can be late with their area without actually looking downstream to see how that lateness affects other people and their ability to deliver.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about the project profession is that it's got a bit of a image problem, because there's this trial by media that happens, right, Judith? So, for example, when do we ever hear about project management in the newspapers? It's never good news, is it? It's always because something's, I don't know, government IT project overspent or late, or railway project late, or whatever it is. It's always bad news. We never hear about the good stuff that's going on. I mean, as an example, do you know about the electronic prescription service? I don't know if your listeners will know this. So this was what used to happen if you went to your GP surgery, your doctor's surgery. They give you a handwritten prescription to take to the pharmacy, and then they hand you over whatever your medication was that you needed. That disappeared overnight, and we now have this really well joined up computer system where the doctor can effectively type into his computer or her computer, whatever it is that you want, and it goes to the pharmacy of your choice, and you can just go and pick it up. So it got rid of a whole load of fraud and all kinds of problems and so on. Overnight, it was a government-funded IT project that went well. Where was the fanfare? It wasn't mentioned in any newspapers at all. So we've got to be proud of the projects. We don't have enough of that. And that results in the kind of thing that you described before, where, project managers are seen as being people who are maybe kind of, they're just there to do Gantt charts, or pushing people to stick to a timeline or a schedule, which, as you say, hasn't been consulted on, and so on. And most of the time, that's not actually true. And if anything, I see the profession over the past few years really moving from being seen as a kind of technical administrative function to being seen as a strategic function. I mean, I could replace the term project management with strategy execution, because I think that's what it really is. It's about how do we deliver the change that leaders are trying to deliver. That's where I see projects adding real value.
And I guess that's a lot what you guys have had to do to make it happen, make that through the qualifications you do and how you've changed what you're measuring. So people, it's a bit like many years ago, IT was considered, the people that were the IT technicians were considered unable to communicate with end users. And then obviously the standards changed and what the company changed. And now IT people are amazing communicators, very good at adding strategic value. They're not just these people, these mysterious people that come up from the basement, fix a computer and disappear again, almost like, did you see the IT guy? It's like, and sometimes it's just time and other times it's to do with how things are perceived. So tell me then.
Yeah.
How have you scaled, like somebody sitting there, because there are so many organizations, whether there are ombudsman groups or, things like that, who would love to know how they can scale their membership. What would they need to do?
Well, as I said before, it's not the same in every organization. But it's about trying to figure out what is it that is the main barrier, and then remove it. So, as I say, in APM's case, it was around kind of technical debt, and its profile and the profile of the profession, if you like. So they're the things that we've focused on. So we've focused on C-suite engagement. We've been focused on really improving our kind of digital capacity and capability, and that's what started to move the dial. But in my previous organization, which was the National Association for Special Educational Needs, so that was effectively a professional body for school SENCOs, so the special needs coordinators in schools. They had a completely different issue. So that was when I started there, it was a relatively small organization. They probably had around about 3,500 members, something of that order. And that was going down. It went down to less than 3,000 at one point. And that membership made up, let's say, 90%, maybe even more, of the organization's revenue. So you can see they had a problem. In fact, I would say they were, if they were carried on in the way they were going to go bust. And so I was with that organization for 6 years, and we grew that organization in that 6 years from a 3,000 member association to 45,000 members, and it's now got more than 120,000 members. So what did we do in that case? We made the membership free. Now you might say, Adam, that's completely bonkers, because if that's 90+% of the organization's revenue, they're not going to survive. But the truth is, the organization was spending all of its revenue trying to prop up a membership model, which wasn't going to work. And the main reason people weren't becoming members is because schools are really strapped for cash. I mean, really strapped for cash, to the point where they're having to lose teachers. So if you can't actually afford teachers in a school, you're going to start cutting other costs out before you lose staff. So things like subscriptions to professional bodies, they're going to go. So what we did instead was we made the membership free. And what that did was it supercharged the membership. All of a sudden, we had penetration into almost every school in the country. And what that meant is that we had a different type of value. Instead of kind of revenue value from our members, we had reach. And that meant that I could talk to government, so the Department for Education, for example, and say to them, look, if you want schools to do inclusion better, then actually we're the organisation to talk to. So then we started getting government contracts to actually help schools to improve. So instead of charging schools, we were using government money to help schools. So we've changed the value proposition, made it free at the point of use, and created alternative forms of revenue. So in their case, it was a revenue diversification model. And alongside that, we set up an international consultancy arm as well, because what we realized when we started working with the UK government is that actually there are governments around the world. We're quite critical of our education system here, but other places around the world, British education is the envy of everybody else. So actually they're very interested. So this was something we could then create a new revenue stream from. It didn't exist before, around international consultancy for the governments. And so that went from, as I say, in the 6 years, 3,000 members to 45,000 members. And it went from being an organisation that had around about £1 million turnover to £5 million turnover. So, it's a clear, clearly a clear period of phenomenal growth for the organisation that it went through, and that extended after I left, which is, by the way, another key thing. If the growth stops when the leader leaves, there's a problem with the model. So I was really pleased to see that, I've been out of that organisation now for more than 3 years, and it's still growing, and that tells me that we got the foundations right.
Yes, because we can't forget that project management needs leadership. You need to be able to lead and be able to influence other people to be able to be a project manager.
Absolutely. So we have a competence framework for people who want to be a project professional. And within that competence framework, there are kind of various different elements. And some of those are quite process-driven things. But quite a lot of them are people-driven tasks. So things like, stakeholder engagement, for example. That can't be underestimated, because if you can't bring people with you on a change journey, there's no point. The inertia is going to kick in, and you're going to end up back where you started. So that people side of things, sometimes called the soft skills. I actually don't like that phrase, soft skills, Judith, because it kind of implies that they're not that important. The Americans call them power skills. I quite like that. It's the same thing, but they just have a different name.
Yeah, I have actually seen things called power skills, and I was like, that sounds interesting. And then looked at it and go, that looks like they're soft skills training.
Yeah, they're the same thing.
Skills makes more sense, to be fair.
Yeah, but that's really important. So one of the things we do, if someone's going to become a chartered project professional, we make sure they are as equipped in the people side of things as they are in the process and kind of technical knowledge side of things.
Yeah, I like that. So making sure they have the right power skills to move forward. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Let's listen to a quick advert. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious. So can anybody be a project manager then?
Yeah, they can. And one of the things I really like about the project profession is it's almost a catalyst for social mobility because of its diversity of entry points. So if I take other professions, I don't know, let's say healthcare. So if you want to be a doctor, for example, or the legal profession, so you want to be a lawyer, the bar to entry is quite high. Often you've got to have done a degree. You've got to have got to a certain level in terms of your academic standing before you can actually even start your kind of formal training in those areas. Now, the project profession, there are those academic routes they exist, but actually you can start as a project professional straight out of school on an apprenticeship scheme, and there's a role for you there. In fact, most people who are in the project profession actually didn't start out there. They've often had a parallel career in a related profession and then fallen into it sideways. So maybe they've been, I don't know, a chartered surveyor, and one day they've woken up and said, I'm not doing a lot of surveying anymore. I seem to be running projects. The same is true for people who are maybe in architecture and actually often people who are in just leadership roles in general often find that leadership now is often about delivering change rather than delivering business as usual. So that change is often delivered through projects. So, people kind of find themselves in these roles sometimes by accident. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, anybody can do it. And there is evidence that shows that the first 10 years of a project professional's career is the fastest 10 years of salary growth. So as a kind of vehicle, as I say, for social mobility, that's really powerful because it means from any background, you can very quickly be making a sensible amount of money that can make a drastic difference to your lifestyle.
Adam, do you see AI making a change in this? Because with all the prolific apps and using the AI to help you come out with the checklist, the timescales, the Gantt charts, how do you see that impacting on the project manager?
Yeah, really, really good question, and very timely because I think every organization in the country is trying to grapple with AI and its potential implications. So there's a few schools of thought on this. So the kind of doomsday folk will say, oh, we won't need any project professionals in the future because won't AI do it all? I don't subscribe to that view particularly, but I also don't think that the role will be the same now because of AI. So there will definitely be things that can be automated because of AI. So let's take something like you talked about planning and scheduling. So let's say the AI does the planning and scheduling for me. The question then is who checks the planning and scheduling? Who's able to look at that and say, yeah, you know what, that give it the sniff test. That looks about right. You're going to need a really good planner or scheduler to do that, right? Because they know what good looks like. And in this future world where it's all done by AI, there are far fewer of these planners and schedulers around. And actually, you don't just need an average one. You need a good one because they're going to have to look at this with almost having no involvement in the actual planning or scheduling, just looking at the output and getting a sense of whether that's right. Because we know that the AI hallucinates, right? It sometimes makes stuff up. Sometimes it comes to the wrong conclusion, but based on a kind of logical argument. So we do need those kinds of people. So I don't think it's going to replace people or roles, but I do think it will change the emphasis of those types of roles. So I think we'll need more assurance roles. And I think we talked about the people and processes side of things earlier on. If you imagine that AI kind of starts to automate some of that process side of roles, we're going to be even more dependent on getting the people side of roles right. So you can't hide behind the fact that you're a really good process person anymore, because that's going to be less important. It is going to be more about those power skills that we were talking about before. So yeah, it's going to change the profession profoundly.
Yeah, because as I say, that kind of old style of this is the plan, we're not changing the plan because I've got the plan, to, oh, I understand that Johnny over there, something's happened, so he's not going to be able to do this, or he's not as reliable as Jane. So when he told me it's going to take a week, I might need to add on 3 more weeks because, that kind of discernment will be very hard for an AI to do at the moment.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I think one of the things the AI is really good at is taking a much broader set of data and probably giving a more objective assessment of things. I mean, so for example, one of the problems I think project professionals have is they have this kind of optimism bias. They want the project to go well, right? Because it's partly a reflection on them. So therefore, when they're kind of really assessing the potential impact of, let's say, a member of staff not being available to deliver on part of this, there has been a tendency to use what's known in the profession as watermelon reporting. Have you heard this phrase before? Watermelon.
I haven't actually. Tell me about that. That sounds interesting.
Oh, right. So this is like if you have like a RAG rating. So for your listeners who don't know what I'm talking about here, this is red, amber, green rating. So you've got a spreadsheet of different things that need to be completed, and you've got each of them is assessed with a red, amber, or green on how likely or not that's likely to be, with green being it's all on track, red it's off track, and amber somewhere in the middle. So watermelon reporting is when you have things which are reported as green, but you only have to scratch a little bit beneath the surface and you find it's really red on the inside. So that's what we call watermelon reporting. It comes from optimism. It's not lying. it's because it's optimism bias because people believe that things are going to get back on track. And that's where the AI sometimes it is less likely to be caught out. So the example would be where, let's say, someone's off ill for a week, and the project manager says, "Oh, right, okay. What does this mean for the end date for your project? But you're still going to be able to deliver on time." I say, "Yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely sure I can catch up." So instead of reporting that as amber because the person's out for a week and there's a risk then to the time, the schedule, they put it down as green because we all think it's going to be okay. Whereas the AI might have said, well, actually, in the other 100 occasions where someone's taken a week off ill, it's usually resulted in it being late. So I'm going to rate that, red or whatever. So you see the difference.
Yes, I think it comes down to data, right? So whatever data
Yes.
that the AI has, it can process, and some of that human data might not ever get inputted into the AI because maybe as humans we don't think about it, or the amount that's needed to have an accurate portrayal might be too difficult. So I think you're right. The kind of, oh, what happens if it's going to be late? Oh, we can judge that on average, this is that. You're totally right. But the differences between John and Jane would probably require too much data at the current time for it to make an assessment that if Jane's off sick for a week, it's okay because her team's got it all covered. But when John's off sick, it isn't because he hasn't, or whatever.
Exactly that. And this is where we get into a discussion then about kind of quality of data. And this is, you made the really good point there that AI is only as good as the data that goes in. And this is where some of the AI hallucinations kind of come. So if people don't know what the AI hallucination is, this is where, as I say, the AI kind of comes up with something that's wrong. Sometimes it makes it up. Sometimes it, as I say, creates it based on a logical chain of thinking, but comes up with the wrong answer. But a human looking at the same answer will go, well, that's plainly ridiculous. I'll give you a really good example of this. In the police force, if someone witnesses a crime and they have to describe the person, so they produce like an EFIT.
Yeah.
So this is a piece of AI. This is generative AI they use for that now. So they used to obviously get people drawing it. Now what happens is you describe the person, you say, oh, they had big ears and bushy eyebrows or whatever it was, and then the AI comes up with a picture. What they found in the first kind of iteration of this EFIT technology was that when they described the person, often it was coming up with an image of a face, and it always had a horizontal line through the neck. And people were really racking their brains and saying, what is this horizontal line? It keeps coming up with every single time, this horizontal line. And when they looked at the data that was used to train the model, it was headshots from social media accounts, right? That's what they used. Millions and millions and millions of these headshots. And what they realized is that a lot of these headshots were people standing in front of a horizon. And the AI had said, oh, I've noticed this horizontal line, the horizon, is in lots of these pictures. That must be a feature of a face, just like the eyes and the nose and the teeth and whatever else. And so every time I produce something, and now clearly a human looks at that and says, well, that's ridiculous. And this is back to that assurance point earlier on. You need to build in what we call anti-hallucinogenic workflows. This assurance role where someone looks at this and says, hang on a minute, there's something not quite right here.
That's kind of funny. All right, then. So I understand then you're 110, 100 squared, and that the best way to scale up a membership is to remove the things that are slowing it down.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a large exec team then?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's different in this organization to my last. It's in my last organization, we had a very small exec team. It was like at one point, it was literally the three of us. So it was myself. We had a kind of COO type person who led on finance, and then we had a chief education officer because of the nature of the organization. It was obviously an education organization. So you effectively had someone who did the kind of content side, someone who did the operations side, and then me kind of providing the kind of strategy and vision. So that was quite a different model. In the team where I am now, there are 7 of us. well, in fact, eight if I include myself. So eight of us in the team there. And that's partly because as part of that kind of preparation for growth, you have to start thinking about, well, what functions would we need? What setup would we have if we were bigger than we are now? So it comes back to, earlier on when I was saying about, what would it take, to be 110, 100 organization. So one of the things that comes out of that conversation is people say, oh, well, you couldn't possibly have the, the communications department sitting within the chief executive's office as it does now. That would need to be its own team, and you'd need to have like a head of communications, and so you start to get these insights into kind of the structural setup that you would need to have to deliver for 100,000 members, which might be different to the setup you've got when you're delivering for 25,000 members. And that's helpful because you then don't have to make a huge change down the line because something's broken. You can start to iterate that change over time. And it takes a lot of the pain out of change as well, by the way, because when the organization tells you, well, if you really want to have 100,000 members, you're going to have this kind of structure in the organization. So we say, right, long term, might take us 10 years, but that's where we want to get to. So therefore, everybody's bought into the idea that we're going to have some kind of phased move towards that change over time. So when it comes to doing that change, it's not a huge shock where people suddenly go, oh, I can't believe that we're restructuring and my job's going to be impacted. Everyone's bought into that. And usually it doesn't mean that people lose jobs. It just means they change jobs because that happens in the context of a growing organization.
I like that because it's quite common that sometimes things don't get done because someone in the exec team's worried about losing their job or something like that. So they therefore don't vote for what's good for the organization.
Yeah, that definitely happens. The other thing I try and do as well is to make sure that there are what I call proximate goals. So what I mean by that is, yes, we've got a long-term vision, in this case, 110, 100, and that's really important. But you've got to give people some successes along the way. There's got to be some of the, the quick wins, the easy wins, and some of those smaller things, because then people know that they're kind of on the right track and things. Well, if you just go for the big target, then what happens is all the way along that journey, people haven't got anything to hold on to. So they're kind of in the wilderness a little bit, it's kind of like we feel like we might be making progress, but we haven't got anything to kind of sense check where we are along the way. Was this part of the plan? Was it supposed to be like this? And you only kind of celebrate the success when you do the big win at the end. So you need to have those little wins kind of planned in advance. And that for me, that's as important as the big strategic goal at the end.
That makes sense. So before we end for today, tell me, is there anything that you wanted to talk about but you didn't?
No, it's been a really interesting conversation. I suppose the only thing I would probably just say is there might be individuals out there who are listening to this who are working for organizations that are trying to deliver change and transformation in their organization. That's probably every organization out there, right? Because I think everybody's delivering change and transformation. If you haven't thought about the role that the project profession can play in making that change and transformation a success, I'd urge you to do that. There's not just APM out there. There are plenty of other organizations as well. But I think just formalizing the role of the project profession in helping you to kind of realize the benefits of the change that you're trying to drive, I think will accelerate and amplify your efforts.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Adam.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Judith.
You're welcome. And thank you out there for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I'm Judith Germain, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.